This podcast is brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those that love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew. It's episode 466 of the Craft Beer and Brewing Podcast. I'm Jamie Bogner, and joining me today from Tennessee is Ryan McCay of Living Waters. Welcome to the podcast, Ryan.
Thanks. Great to be here.
And if for those of you who read Craft Beer and Brewing, in the last issue, our malt issue, Living Waters scored a 97 for their barrel-aged Dyson Sphere Construct 4. That beer name is quite a mouthful. Scored a 97, top scoring barrel-aged beer in our barrel-aged in that category. Also scored a 94 for barrel-aged Papanoo. And that kind of sparked this idea. We should talk a little bit about making barrel-aged beers. You are in Nashville, Tennessee. Obviously, lots of whiskey comes out of that area between Tennessee and Kentucky. So there's plenty to draw from directly from distillers. There's plenty also from, because the whole culture there is very whiskey centric. And so I think getting into your mind and understanding how you do this, you use a method for making barrel-aged beer that is very much like the method that lots of whiskey blenders use, using different recipes, using different ages, using different barrels, and building those beers, whether it's barley wine or barrel-aged stout, building those finished beers out of different components. And you have built a wide range of those components in order to pull from them to build some of these blends, but you are also dialed in on flavor and have some very nuanced and specific ideas of what you're trying to achieve in that. So when we get into it, I want to pick your brain about those kinds of flavors. Want to mention two things before we start. Coming up to CBC in Philly, we're going to do a live version of this very podcast with the IPA gang, Vinny Chilurzo, Evan Price of Green Cheek, Kelsey McNair of North Park, and some special guests. We're going to have a couple of special guests throughout the course of it. We're going to do a live on stage at Union Transfer. And I'll tell you what, I've got a few tickets to give away to podcast listeners. So if you are a listener and would like a ticket to go see that, a free ticket, just shoot me an email, jbogner@beerandbrewing.com. I'll send you a link for a 100% free ticket to come check it out because we want everybody to come and see us right there live in Philly. It is going to be a fantastic time. We're going to have some great beer there. And, it's going to be the first time doing this really live in front of an audience in a produced kind of way. And I am excited to bring the podcast live. They're also going to have audience questions. So if you've got some questions for Vinny and Evan and Kelsey, and I know a lot of you all do because we had a lot of listens to the episodes that they've been on. I think almost a quarter, maybe even over a 250,000 total downloads of those episodes in aggregate. So a lot of folks are listening to it. Come on out, be a part of it. It's going to be something special Monday night, the 20th, April 20th at Union Transfer in Philly. Starts about 7 o'clock. And if you want a ticket, just shoot me an email. The other thing, right before we logged on here to record this, I read that Alex Laws of Whiplash in Dublin has passed away. Alex joined me on episode 383 of the podcast. Anyone who had met Alex knows what a person, what a remarkable light. He had an energy and an excitement to him. He had an incredible sense of taste and style and just a wonderful spark. And so I just want to say, Alex, you lived life well, and hope for the best for everyone that has loved Alex. But what a remarkable thing. I'm going to go back and listen to that episode just to listen to his voice again. What a sad note to kick this off on, but I just feel like we had to say it because, gone way, way too young. Once again, episode 383, if you all aren't familiar, what a sharp guy. We're going to talk about barrel-aged beer on this episode. And before we do that, the Craft Brewers Conference is coming up April 20th through 23rd. And G&D Chillers will be there. If you're heading to CBC, swing by and talk shop with the folks who know brewery operations inside and out. G&D's biggest strength isn't just the equipment, it's their deep understanding of how a brewery runs. From cellar layout to production flow, their team brings decades of hands-on experience to every install and every conversation. Whether you're running a single-stage 5H unit or scaling up with a vertical air chiller, G&D builds systems that are reliable, efficient, and built to last, because when your chiller's solid, your beer stays cold and your operation stays on track. Plan your visit at gdchillers.com/podcast and come see him at CBC booth 1518. And Berkeley Yeast just launched Dry Tropics London, their best-selling liquid yeast strain. Now with all the ease-of-use benefits of dry yeast, Dry Tropics London delivers the soft, pillowy mouthfeel and juicy character you'd expect from a top-tier London ale strain, but with a serious upgrade, a burst of thiols that unleash vibrant, layered notes of grapefruit and passion fruit. A lot of brewers love the clean passion fruit you get from Tropics, but they don't want every IPA to be a tropical fruit bomb. At the dry yeast price point, you can pitch and ditch without breaking the bank, or you can co-pitch with your house strain to adjust the intensity of the notes. And with nationwide free shipping, there's never been a better time to try Dry Tropics. Order now at berkeleyyeast.com and experience the ease and impact of Dry Tropics London yeast. Also, this episode is sponsored by PackTech, delivering craft beer multi-packing you can trust. PackTech's handles are made from 100% recycled plastic and are fully recyclable, helping breweries close the loop and advance the circular economy. With a minimalist design, durable functionality you can rely on, and custom color matching, PackTech helps brands stand out while staying sustainable. Trusted by craft brewers nationwide, they offer a smarter, sustainable way to carry your beer. To learn more, visit packtech-opi.com. That's PAKTECH-OPI.com. All right, Ryan, give us a little bit of background on you, on Thomas, your partner, and on Living Waters. Thomas was going to join us for this, but due to some technical difficulties, we just couldn't make it work. So, Ryan, you are driving the boat on this one. Give us some background on you guys and on Living Waters. Do you like that, driving the boat, Living Waters? I mean, I'm full of it. I'm full of these things today.
Great dad joke. We opened up in August of 19, right before COVID. So that was awesome. Thomas comes from a music background. He was on the road a lot and he wanted to come off the road. And, I just come from an IT background and kind of was doing a lot of home brewing, trying a lot of different beers all over the place, and decided to, go for it. And so we opened up our first location, and that was in East Nashville, still is there today. And it's been a journey, playing Mario Kart during shutdown and on the wall and a projector and just, making beer as we can, and got into distro heavy after that. And the rest is kind of where we're at today, just a lot of IPAs and lagers and stouts and barleywine.
Sure. So what was the kind of you decided to start a brewery, but you had to have an idea of what you're going to make, why you're going to make it, and who you're going to serve. How'd you start to articulate, what you wanted to be known for, and then, build that idea out there with beer consumers? Because, in 2019, Nashville still had a pretty savvy, craft beer audience. There's a number of established players. CBC, had already been there once and then came back again afterward. So a lot of us have seen Nashville from that perspective. To jump out there and what'd you decide to do?
Yeah, really, my focus was on big stouts. That's what I really wanted to make at the time. I was drinking a lot more of those and hazy IPAs. Bearded Iris and Southern Grist were about 2 years old right around then, whenever we opened up. And so our focus was really on, hazy IPAs and big stouts. We opened with 7 stouts on tap, which was kind of crazy for the time.
Yes.
But we're also a coffee shop, so we had 5 different variants of different coffees that were added to the same base, just to kind of showcase the differences. And that, for some reason, I thought that was a good idea. It was fun. But
you learn from these things. Yeah.
Yeah. Still sold more hazy than we sold anything else, but that's how it goes.
It's the beer market. You always will. And so, that is that. So you wanted to make a mark, and obviously you're engaged beer fanatic in addition to a brewer. And now you get to build this brewery that makes the things that you also liked trading for and drinking and enjoying with friends, and and throw your own hat in the game and say, hey, I can do this as well as those folks that I'm going after. But the coffee thing is interesting to me. So you guys are a full service coffee shop, and and coffee is also at the core. You don't view it as something you've added on to beer. It's something that you are equally focused on.
Yeah. So when we first started, we had a third, and he's still a part of the business, but he came from a specialty coffee background, and so we didn't want to be the brewery that made coffee or the coffee shop that made beer, and so we were really just focused on, we didn't do any batch brew when we first started. We were doing pour overs exclusively. If you wanted that kind of thing, we didn't serve it with milk. Obviously, things have changed since then, and we're still very focused on that. We're a multi-roaster, so we don't roast our own coffee yet, but we get coffee from all over the world, and so there's some really fun things. It also blends in with what we do from a beer perspective, because a lot of the coffees are co-ferments. So we're getting like papaya co-ferment coffee that is just insane, and just a lot of fun.
Papaya co-ferment coffee. Explain to me what that is as a coffee amateur.
Yeah, so a lot of the co-ferments, what they're doing now, and I'm also a coffee amateur. I would not. That's my head of coffee, Kennedy, is much more in tune with a lot of this than I am. So, but with natural coffees, they're letting the coffee cherry sit on the bean as it is, drying. But they kind of add another level to that, and so they will put like watermelons or papayas or whatever on top of those beans, and then pitch yeast or use the natural yeast from the area, the microflora, and then that causes it to be infused with that. Whenever you roast it, you still get the watermelon or papaya or other flavors. It's kind of a global warming thing too. It can take a lower grade coffee and increase its value, so the farmer gets more value for the bean than they normally would. So it's a win all around.
Interesting, and that flavor, those flavors persist then through, that fermentation process.
Oh yeah, no, it's wild. It's a wild west of co-ferment coffees right now. So
you also mentioned that you enjoy your staffing process here is actually a little more coffee focused than it is beer. That it's easier to train beer into people than it is to train coffee?
Yeah, we just have found that there's so many weird nuances with like running a coffee shop and a brewery. But yeah, a lot of the baristas that are making all these different coffees, a lot of the flavors are a lot more subtle until you get to like the co-ferments. But when you're doing a washed coffee from Kenya versus Ethiopia, there are differences there, but they're a lot more subtle than beer in general. So we just find it's a lot easier to hire baristas, and I can train them on beer, and we do regular tastings of beers from the local market and all over. So we get to introduce people to a lot of different brands and a lot of different styles that they've never had before. And they love it because also, not ironically, but tip rate on beer is a lot higher than coffee. So it's like that uppers versus downer thing, right? You'll spend 7 minutes making a pour over, 8 minutes making a pour over, and no one will do anything. You get a 5-ounce pour and 20% tip, and so they like it. It works all around for everybody.
That's an interesting one, that baristas may have more developed palates that you can then, and maybe even a connection to articulate some of those flavors in a way that helps, connect those things with a customer that might ask questions. And having that skill set can be pretty important. You're right. Even as a beer tender, trying to explain what's going on in those beers and helping people find some of those nuanced flavors in them.
Yeah, no, it's been a wild ride and fun. It's a lot of fun to introduce people to new things. And so we just had the staff meeting last night, so I'm a little hungover from that.
And tell me about these staff meetings. This is another interesting one where you all, over many years, I know I've talked about it a bunch of times on the podcast. I don't want to bore people by talking about it again, but one of the trends we I have personally witnessed with staff and teams at breweries is that to use some context, I think there was an old Emigre magazine, a design magazine, a font maker, and they used a phrase, you read best what you read most. And I think the same can be true of the palate and drinking. You like most what you consume most, because the act of consuming something actually imprints it on our own palate. And so over time within a brewery, if you may have a free beer for staff, promo program, which is great. Staff loves free beer, but if they start only drinking the beer from that brewery, then their palate becomes very narrow and very tuned into that brewery, but not tuned in the way that a customer tastes across lots of different breweries and builds a broader idea of what they like and what is good. And so, there are some of those ways, and I love hearing brewers talk about, well, we tasted this in a blind test and everyone liked ours more than the other brewery. I'm like, of course they did. Of course they did. Like, that's not a surprise that, the methodology that you're using here is maybe incorrect and you should try to correct for that. And so for you guys, Ryan, you make a point of bringing in beers from other brewers on a regular basis and helping make sure that your team builds this broad idea of flavor and palate.
Yeah, no, it's something that's been very important to me from the start. Is just, we go through our normal, hour of handling all the stuff we have to do, right? And then it's, okay, let's go drink. And, last night, so we had about 20 different lagers that were from local area, as well as from, Pacific Northwest and from, New England area, just to kind of show. And those are all just friends that are sending me beer, or I'm picking them up at the local store. So we're getting a good sample of what people can expect from other local breweries, as well as what they can expect from outside of our market, which I think is important since we have so many tourists in Nashville. And then we did the same for Hazy IPA last night. And then we tasted a bunch of stouts from some really good breweries, and had a couple of ours in there just to showcase, this is, try to do style for style. So usually it's a focus of one particular style per meeting, but last night we had about 50 beers. So it was a lot.
So a great day at the brewery today after all of that. Sure. But an interesting process to always make sure that, and then you did every 6 weeks, so constantly engaging with maybe not 50 beers every 6 weeks, but I like that as a kind of an ongoing process to make sure that you're tuned in to where beer is on a national and international kind of level, and not just what you all are making. Well, let's definitely talk about the way that you make stouts and your approach to that, and I'll say stouts and then barley wines also, because I want to get into some of that, from base recipes into that cask conditioning process, and then ultimately into that blending, and from after blending, or however that process works, how you think about eventual ingredients that you are also then going to add into these, how that may even affect the blend, and how your creative process is driven. I want to talk about all of those things. And sorry, that was just the entire rest of the podcast all in one question. We're going to talk about all of those things. But first, taste the flavors of indie hops at CBC this year in Philly. 14 incredible beers will showcase Strata, Luminosa, Lorien, Audacia, plus their most promising new experimental hop, IH19082, in a single hop XPA. Experience their newest hop, Audacia, in an IPA by Grand Fir, a hoppy lager by Meanwhile, and a hazy by Worthy Brewing. Explore the wonders of Strata and IPAs from Odell, Russian River, Grains of Wrath, and Grand Fir. Refresh your palate with the crisp, summery flavors of Lorien and an Italian Pils by Sun River and a Mexican lager by Holdout. And bask in the liquid sunshine magic of Luminosa with an IPA from Fort George. Check out the full CBC beer lineup at www.indiehops.com and plan to stop by their booth number 926. They'll be as happy to see you as you'll be that you made the effort. Indie Hops, life is short. Let's make it flavorful. I really enjoyed drinking those beers last year at CBC, and I will be there again sampling them myself. And this podcast is sponsored by the Midea 5050 Flex, the industry's first dual-compartment, three-way convertible freezer. The 5050 Flex is designed to flex with your life. It can convert to all fridge, all freezer, or half and half with just the touch of a button. Plus, with reversible doors and adjustable storage compartments, you can stay organized no matter what your food storage needs. The 5050 Flex is also designed to maintain a stable temperature even in non-climate controlled spaces. So it's perfect for your garage, man cave, or wherever you need a little more space. Maybe use all 20 cubic feet as a beer fridge. Check out midea.com/US for more information on how to take your beer storage to the next level. Also, if your brewery is using fruit juice concentrates, purees, and blends, then why not source everything from a one-stop shop? Old Orchard might be best known for flavored blends, but if you need 100% purees or concentrates, then Old Orchard can likely help, even with options not listed on their website. Let Old Orchard know what you need at oldorchard.com/brewer. That's oldorchard.com/brewer. All right, Ryan, you had some ideas as a home brewer that you wanted to make stout. When you launched a brewery in 2019, you were going to make some stouts and you wanted to make a mark out there in the barrel-aged stout world. You had developed a whole bunch of recipes and you've continued to develop more recipes. As you think about barrel-aged stout now, what does it look like for you currently? Describe that kind of creative process. Does it start with like hey, this is a flavor I think we should make, or do you use multiple kinds of creative modes for these?
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, I think one of the biggest things that we started off doing and we still do all the time now is I always harass my malt suppliers, specifically Chris Lovett from Country Malt. Probably gets annoyed with me a lot. But yeah, I ask him for samples and we do hot steeps on all different malts that we're interested in using. That also just gives me a good idea of, I mean, it's basically like making a pour over for hot or for malt, which we have all the tools needed from our coffee shop to do. So we just do that for every single malt, and then I taste it to get an idea of what that's going to kind of contribute and if the malt's good or not. And from there, that goes into just another quiver or an arrow in the quiver for how we design our recipes. But yeah, so that's one element of it for sure.
So then as you're tasting these malts, like you keeping notes on these and thinking, oh, this is adding something, or filing it away in that brain. And then, do you then build a new stout recipe around that? And what would be, give me some examples. Is there a malt that you had steeped recently or, within the last 2 years, you're like, I think this is going to do this and I have to work it in. And how do you then work that into a recipe? You just pull out one for one with something else, or,
So, I mean, I'm one of those brewers that has a nightmare recipe of like 20, 30 malts and a particular beer recipe. And so when I'm looking at Vienna malts, for example, I'll look at, hey, send me every single Vienna malt that you have, and I'm doing a blind. And I'm looking for a particular characteristic in that Vienna, or I don't like using a ton of roasted barley. I like to use, wheat. Chocolate wheat is one of the things I use a lot of. So I'll tell Chris, like, send me every single chocolate wheat that you have in your portfolio, and then I'll get all the other ones too. And then looking for the best expression of that particular malt whenever I'm using it. And yeah, it's just ratios. It's like dark versus light crystal and versus base malt. I love Maris Otter. So I have a good amount of recipes that are using just pure two-row, and then some that are using Maris Otter, and then the combination. So it's a little bit of everything, but it's also what's going to fit well with the whiskey that we tasted out of that barrel. So it's all the small things I think add up to a really good base beer that can go into the barrel.
So tell me about that. You may get a barrel that was part of a store pick for a local store. Hopefully it gets to you pretty fresh, and so you get to also taste the whiskey in a bottle that came out of that, and and so then what are the elements of that whiskey or bourbon flavor that would lead you in different directions as you are designing then the specific base recipe that's going to go into, those barrels or that barrel?
hmm Yeah. So, I mean, with a lot of the barrel picks, I try to get the younger barrel picks just so the barrel's not so used up. Um, but also sometimes, because we're so close, we can just drive up to Four Roses and they'll let me just pick the barrels if I bring a 4-pack of beer to the people on the dock. And so we can pick the recipe we want and do that, which is a nice kind of like col- collaboration in some ways. But yeah, so I'll take
You have a favorite Four Roses recipe then?
a few different ones. I mean, I can never guess what I'm gonna get out of that particular pick. Usually it's just like we go at a certain time of day so that there's enough barrels out there, and then I can just take the recipes that I know will go well. But yeah, so
That's
few
fair.
different
I'm a
ones.
big Four Roses fan, and I love those barrel strength, kinds of picks. So you grab some of those barrels that have been freshly dumped, potentially off, and what is it about the specific flavor, in one of those whiskeys that will like steer you in different directions in this base recipe that you make?
Yeah, I think it's just like overcoming, like if I'm picking a rye heavy or a wheated whiskey, they're going to present in different ways. And so a lot of times, like if I'm like Willet is a good example of barrels that I really enjoy, but are hard to get. But like a Willet rye versus a Willet bourbon barrel are very, very different. And so usually I'll use the Willet rye barrels because I like the taste of their rye and what it adds to a stout recipe. Because the rye is so prominent, I try to design that recipe so that it's going to just be very smooth and overcome that rye flavor a little bit to smooth it out. Through using just like crystal malts in combination to sweeten it up a little bit, and maybe some like brown sugar in the boil to really kind of help with that. So.
And when you say that, you're talking about the kind of some of the like spicy, grassy nature of rye, because it also, has a fruity component to, as well, which, almost leans in with some of the, maybe a slightly additional sweetness.
Yeah, and so using like some Special B, I really like Special B as a ingredient to like specifically with rye barrels. I think that it brings out a good character in a blend. So I never use like 100% rye barrels, but like if I'm looking for something that's a little older aged, it's usually going to be a rye barrel that I'm letting sit for a little longer on purpose just to get some more character from that. And the recipe will typically have a higher proportion of Special B from Castle, just because that's the Special B that I like and am annoying about.
So then, like, let me completely back up because we're talking about recipes, but I should understand this process. You are not always thinking about an exact single stream. This is going to become this beer, and I am now putting this into this barrel to ultimately become that beer. You're also putting some of these into barrels knowing that this stock I will blend this into a beer at this point in the future, but that also requires you to have some kind of understanding of, like, at some point, you're also a business. You can't just like put an infinite amount of beer into barrels and put all of this in there. You have to know how much you kind of want to produce in a year, have some broader idea about what those releases are going to be, and then also be tracking the age of the barrels that you have, and as those are maturing, understand how you're going to add those new things. Talk to me about some of that kind of like that forecasting and like production process. Like I think I'm going to release 4 year, 6 year, whatever that is, and then what that, and how you have to back from that to build a production strategy around it.
Yeah, I mean, our goal every year when it comes to how we're selecting the barrels, I do everything blind. And so we're taking samples out of those. I don't know how old the barrel is. I don't know any details about it. And that's on purpose. That we just have an identifier number that tells me which one it is so I can go back and look at what it is. So we'll design the recipe around that barrel in particular. Whenever we're putting beer into it, unless we have excess. So, I mean, usually we can only design, let's say I'm filling 2 barrels at a time because we're an 8-barrel setup. So one of those barrels is designed for, right? The other is not because I just have excess volume. And usually that's where we'll put like the younger, the Four Roses, that is a younger barrel that Has a good recipe on it, but it's going to get more vanilla out of that. So we're going to get good character out of that. We know that we're going to try to release, about 6 barrel-aged beers a year. And we have our members club that gets 7 unique releases a year. Usually that's an offshoot of a blend that we're using for something else. That's kind of how I manage the volume. But so yeah, and I mean we were brewing a stout every month. Now it's less than that. There's just less demand for stouts than there once was. But yeah, we're just making sure that what we do blend is really good. And if it gets old and we have to dump it, then we dump it. It's happened before. You just have some barrels that have problems and they never really. We had a chocolate rye barrel that was like, well, this will be a fun experiment, and it was just a nightmare of all kinds, just terrible beer. So dumped it. But
if it's not going to add to the blend, don't put it in the beer.
Yeah.
So then, at any given point in your barrel cellar, you then have different ages of beer, brewed in different seasons over the course of the year. And, what's the kind of sampling and tasting timing for that? Does it happen each time you are creating a new blend, or do you do all of those at one point of the year?
No, it's throughout the year. I'm going in and taking sample vials off of every barrel that is over 12 months old. We'll also taste some that are younger if we're worried about them, but usually it's about 12 months is the indicator of this is about ready. With how long we boil and how long we do everything, our average age just keeps on approaching that 3-year mark for all the different blends, just because they're just so sweet when they're finished fermenting and you go into the barrel, because we're starting so high. We're looking for like that 20 Plato drop, but you're still left with a good amount of sugar. So it just needs more time to really finish.
Well, let's use that as our pivot to talk then about what some of those dynamics are, and I still want to talk about any other malts, but then also talk about what the general framework is. If you're going into barrels, relatively sweet, with this idea that it is going to age longer and hold up, as I think most of us know now, that higher gravity of barrel entry is definitely one of those predicting factors for ability to age more gracefully, slowly over time, and be a part of that. So, but I want to talk about that and some of that, fermentation, and then recipe design framework. Before we do that, pumps are critical to any brewing setup, from home brewing through nano brewing, and of course at the pro level, from mash recirculation to wort transfer, and even for cleaning. A quality pump is a key part of every brew day. The SS Brew Pump from SS Brewtech is engineered to tackle even the messiest brew days and do it at a scale homebrewers can afford, featuring an IP55 water resistance rating, an easy-to-use DIN head with 360-degree rotation, and a flow rate of up to 11 gallons per minute. It has the power to keep your brew day moving. Visit ssbrewtech.com/pump to learn more about how the SS Brew Pump can upgrade your home brewery. And tickets are on sale now for the annual Craft Beer and Brewing Brewers Retreat, August 23rd through 26th in the hop country of Yakima Valley, Washington. There is nothing like this fantasy homebrew camp experience as you brew in small groups led by some of the most inspiring brewers in the world. Folks like Vinny and Natalie of Russian River, Ben from Breakside, Henry and Adriana of Monkish, Kelsey from North Park, Whitney from Grand Fir, Sean from Lawson's Finest, and more. This year we'll be brewing under the bines at Bale Breaker, and it is sure to be an unforgettable experience. Tickets are on sale now and going fast at brewersretreat.com. All right, Ryan, so let's talk about, I want to get back to it. I like that, we were talking about Special B and, Maris Otter and all of your favorite malts. Are there any others in that spectrum that you have found add some interesting layers and character inside of Imperial Stout or in Barleywine, for that matter, that can go the distance as those beers age and still kind of convey and come through?
Yeah. So, I think the big thing for us is just variety, like choosing high quality malt that has a flavor profile that I think contributes. We try to do low crystal and high crystal. So, your 40s, your 60s, your Crystal 80, 120. I really like the 120 range. And so with those, I'll choose 2 or 3 different malts in that range to achieve kind of that raisiny flavor and special B. So it's kind of the same approach that we take with like hops of we try to add them in various different stages to get layers of complexity of malt character. And so that's why we end up with a 20 malt recipe, because yes, it's annoying. Yes, it's frustrating and everybody hates me. But it gives that layer of complexity and smoothness that I'm looking for. I don't like a beer to be particularly harsh, and you have to add enough sugar and different malts to achieve kind of that flavor that will stand up to a high proof whiskey, especially if you're getting one out of like a, what's Jack Daniel's barrel pick, which I think the one I got was like 135 proof or something insane like that. And so you're just like, okay, whatever I put in this has to be super sweet. It has to have a lot of character that's going to stand up, because otherwise it's just going to get lost and just taste like whiskey, and then everybody's going to hate it.
Sure. Is there anything to the way that you mash with some of these? Like, because you're talking about, now I imagine you planned for this with a brew system, knowing you were going to be making high gravity imperial stouts, right? You have an oversized mash tun, or you just struggle through it and find a different way?
So this is the funny part. So our master plan was to get a 1950s era dairy tank, saw the top off of it, and mash in there and fill it up as much as possible. Our efficiency is absolute crap. And we can hit, like, it's everything. It's Franken brew, right? So it's not, I wouldn't say designs is the proper term. I'd say it's, we made it work.
It is cobbled together and accomplishes its goal. I mean, because these beers are already inefficient, and they just get even more inefficient in that kind of scenario.
Yeah. And so we just recently went to a new setup, and so we're still kind of like working through that. But yeah, it's all, we opened up, and I think it was very bootstrapped is the best way I can say it. But I would not say that our brew system was was not very elegant. It was very much, let's make this happen,
So we can't talk about mash rakes and a very fine lautering bed or anything along those lines. You just brute force it and get it done.
Yeah, I mean, there was a Master Brewers podcast that I listened to, which was talking about what they wished a mash tun would look like for higher efficiency, and it was, a very large and wide bed, as thin of a bed as you can get. They just wanted it to be a few feet, but as wide as possible, just more surface area. And that's kind of what our mash tun is. It's not, it's kind of an accidental success, if I would say. Like, that's the thing I can point to and say, well, yeah, like, we're manually mixing this. We don't have rakes. It's that kind of, I don't know, there's, I forget the word, but it's just nice. It's nice to feel like you're actually stirring something and I mean, at the time it was taking us an hour to mash in. You're doing this very, very slowly. We didn't have a giant hopper where all the grain is already milled and you're just slowly putting it in at an exact temperature. So yeah, it's still just fun.
Sure. Now, obviously, you have a whole slew of different recipes for base stouts and are constantly writing new ones. Are there some general parameters that you shoot for in terms of, where you want your final gravity to be, knowing that these are going to go into barrels, and so then where that's going to start and how your yeast is going to work through it?
Yeah. So I want to finish around maybe 8 to 10 Plato is where I would like the yeast to finish up, just to have enough sugar. And there sometimes it'll go higher, and will be.
I mean, 8 to 10 Plato is not. That's not as sweet as I thought you were going to say.
No, I mean, that's after the fermentation, right? So that's the finishing,
right,
after yeast has done everything. But yeah, the long boil does everything that we need to get the caramelization, Maillard reactions, and everything. But but yeah, if we can fit, if that's like the lowest it'll go, because we're using Chico predominantly. Sometimes we'll use like 1968. We'll do some different yeast strains depending on what we're trying to accomplish and what the barrel is kind of presenting. But yeah, so but we've had them as high as 20 Plato finishing. It just depends on what the recipe is calling for and what the barrel. Like if I'm going into the 135 proof, yeah, that's going to be like the 20 Plato finishing. And so we'll start really, really high. But yeah, and then we blend that back. And so I think there's what I try to do with the barrels is I'll have some that are drier and some that are by drier I mean like finishing at the 8 to 10 range, and then some that are going to be a lot sweeter, and then you kind of blend them to the rate that you want it to be for a finished product, and that is what gets you to the chewy motor oil kind of thing that you want. So I find that to be a better way to get exactly what I'm looking for than saying this is my stout recipe and I'm going to blend the barrels after. It just gives me another nozzle to turn, to get it exactly where I want it to be.
Sure. How long do you typically boil these for?
So we're a direct fire system and our boil off rate's insane. So we don't really boil for an exact amount of time. We boil until we can fill up 2 barrels. So we will max out our 8 barrel setup, and fill with as much wort as we can, and we will turn it on until it's down to enough for us to fill 250-gallon casks. So
Hey, that makes a lot of sense. So there's quite a bit of reduction then going from 8 barrels, which is 240 gallons, down to what is that, 110 gallons? Are they 55? Are they 50?
yeah, I mean, I think
50s?
we'll do like 120, 130, just because you lose some from the fermenter, just like yeast and other stuff, hops and whatnot. So, but yeah, effectively we're trying to hit that like 120, 130 gallons, which is not a lot of a beer at the end of the day. I think it ends up being like 4 barrels of finished product or something like that.
Sure. So then, you ferment it in, with Chico, you get these, into this nice sweet space. Is there some difference in, as you taste some of those barrels, in how you think about target age, for those, and does that impact some of the other parameters too? Like, as you mentioned, you want some younger, you want some drier, you want some older, you want some sweeter, because that's what's going to give you the palate to blend with later on, but that does change if you're thinking this one's going to need to be in barrels, or this whiskey is probably going to need 2 years, 3 years just to get to where we want it to be. So this base beer going into it needs to be X.
Yeah. So, I mean, I keep notes on every single tasting that I do, and I taste through all of our 12-month plus barrels. And then I don't know the specifics. I have that in a different area, so I keep my bias out of it. And I'm tasting through and basically noting that this is the flavor notes and the sensory that I'm getting off of those. And then I take those and say, this is probably a barrel that I want to design around because it's particularly good character, particularly good flavor, or whatever I'm looking for, but it may not have enough oak, or it may not have enough sweetness because it's like too dry. And so then I'll specifically look for something that's a lot younger. And so then I'll taste on the other end of the spectrum to the ones that are only, maybe 2 years old. And then after I kind of figure out like 2 or 3 barrels that I really like, I start playing with ratios to find out what I actually really enjoy and what kind of hits a good blend for the stout that I'm looking for.
So you let then the barrels drive the blend, and you find that one that starts to anchor it. And once you find the one, then you build the next one, and then the next one, and and it kind of centers around that flavor idea that's driven by your favorite from some of those samples, chosen blindly.
Yep, that's typically how we do it, and especially if we're looking for a non-adjuncted blend, because that's the other thing. It's like if I'm doing a coconut beer, then that's going to be a different target for the barrels and whatnot, because then I need something that's a lot heavier on, barrel character, because the coconut's going to add a lot of sweetness to that. It's not going to detract from, if I'm taking a really sweet barrel and then putting a really sweet adjunct in it, it's just going to become cake, which I do love cake, but sometimes people say that's too sweet, and we try to keep it balanced.
Sure, sure. And I love this kind of blind approach even to the barrels, trying to take some of what the brand of whiskey might be or what the expectation might be and simply approach it as what it is. And is this going to, make for a great beer rather than, because I will say there's a lot of whiskey branding driving certain beer decisions these days. It sounds awesome to have, aged in an ex-bourbon barrel from, hipster distillery. And, you try to drive sales from that. But, that's driven by name, not driven by flavor. And it sounds like you submit yourself to a more rigorous flavor-driven approach.
Yeah, try to. I mean, the good news is that a lot of our barrels, like we were talking about earlier, are barrel picks. And so we're already getting really, really good quality barrels that are good marketing. But no, I mean, I'm not going to take a Pappy barrel, and Pappy barrel would probably be one of the worst ones in my opinion. It's just completely used up by the time we would get it. It's cool marketing, but I probably wouldn't pick the stout that comes out of that as one of my favorites.
Sure, you mentioned rye barrels that are a big favorite. Are there some others that you've found, just really sing when you load beer into them?
Yeah, the Four Roses barrel picks in particular are really good. Whenever I get to go in person to the Four Roses facility up in Kentucky, their bottling facility, those are really good. And I have in general liked those barrels the most. We get a lot of Weller foolproof barrels, and those tend to do pretty good, but they don't have a ton of character. So you have to blend those with a rye barrel or something that has a little bit more character, because the wheated bourbons are just smooth. And there's not a lot of, interesting things going on there. So you have to build a recipe around that to make it work. But yeah, so I'd say we probably see the most of different Weller, WL Weller, which are good marketing. But my favorites are still the Four Roses in general, and the Willets.
Sure, sure. And, some of these barrel picks end up being 7, 8, 9 years. But you also mentioned that there's some benefit to younger whiskey and bourbon and having more left in that barrel that can then leach out into your leach. Leach is a terrible word to use there. Osmote into your beer.
Yeah, no, I mean, what I've read, I'm not a scientist, but from what I've heard from distillers and just conversations, it's that first use bourbon barrel, right? If you can get something that's 3, 4 years old that you're getting a second use out of, you're going to get a lot more vanillin from that oak. So I'm going to get a lot more character from that barrel than something that's, 15, 20 years old. And so when I'm looking for a characterful barrel, almost universally, it's a young oak barrel from Four Roses or something that was only 7 years whenever they emptied it. And that's kind of the ones that I prefer, but also, it's just how you design the stout that's going into it. Like, it can really come from anywhere.
So you may anchor off of something that's maybe a little older and smoother, and then you go find that younger barrel then to add a bit of liveliness to it. And I use liveliness thinking about Living Waters again, just, pulling it together. We're going to keep this on brand for you. Talk about that blending process.
Yeah. So generally, like we were saying, pick an older barrel, and that usually has a lot of the character that I'm looking for the stout blend. And then I'll pick a 2-year-old barrel that has a lot more vanillin in it. And I mean, that's just based on experience, seeing what happens. I'm not actually choosing. The only thing that tells me how old a barrel is the number. So it's like, I know what number barrel we're on right now. So I can reasonably tell that if I'm on, 200 or 300, then I know that that's a younger barrel as opposed to 100, which, was an older barrel. So I know the age from that perspective. And so, yeah, if I select a 150 or a 160 as an anchor, then I'm looking for more body or more sweetness to like balance out the blend. Then I go to the younger barrels and pick those. But usually I have no idea what they are. It's just a number.
Sure, sure. How do you think about, and this is going to be weird, but kind of going back a little ways, how do you think about bitterness as a component here? You mentioned that you don't like roasted barley, that you prefer roasted wheat, from the start. And so you're definitely thinking about that component of roast bitterness in these. And, obviously, like, even whiskey has, some of its own bitterness into it, and that char of those barrels is adding some component of bitterness to the whiskey and will ultimately add some to the beer too. How do you think about bitterness as a general component, not just from malt, but also from the barrel aging process?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely on the low end for bitterness in terms of what we're targeting. We're just doing enough to like stop microbes and stuff from growing that we don't want to grow. And that's kind of like the minimum that we hit. And then we're pH adjusting as we're going to the long boil because you just have pH drops that just happen over the course of it. So we're adding baking soda and chalk to make sure that the pH stays in the right place so you don't get too acidic. But yeah, I mean that's where the sugar comes in. So if we're adding a bunch of brown sugar or cane sugar or different things to really kind of improve the body and give, some simple sugar for the yeast to eat because it's going to prioritize that over the malt sugar, which is what I want to stay. I want the malt sugar to stay because it tastes more like vanilla and, all the things I want. I don't really want the, cane sugar, but we add that so that it'll keep that up. And because it's so sweet, we just don't really worry about the bitterness so much, if that makes sense. It's more
Yeah.
about the ratio of like dark crystal to light crystal is how we kind of balance that out.
Purposely distracting your yeast with easy to ferment sugars, so that you keep the good sugars in there. Pretty fun. Let's talk about the way that you think about designing when ingredients are in play. You mentioned coconut and adding a sweet ingredient and making sure that your stout can support that. But again, you all are a coffee roaster, and coffee also can make its way into your beer. And so, I want to talk about not just process, but I am curious about that as well as how you all think about working coffee flavor into beer in a way that is meaningful and not just an afterthought. I mean, anyone can get a generic coffee character, but it's really hard to get a distinct, origin coffee character to come through in a barrel aged
Yeah.
stout that has a lot of significant flavor. So as you're starting to think about that, how do you match, coffee varieties to steeping process, with those beans and beer in order to, achieve interesting outcomes with coffee stout?
Yeah. So one of the cool things that we do because we're a coffee shop is we have the ability to do things with coffee and beer that most brewers can't. And so a lot of times what we'll do is I'll specifically for our anniversary every year, let me take a step back. We release 3 different coffee stouts. That's what we always do. So we do Tigris, Euphrates, and then we do a members beer, which is only for our beer club. And usually the way I look at it is we do a basic bro coffee stout, which is oh yeah, it tastes like coffee. Um, we'll do and that's Tigris. And then Euphrates is, and these are all Egyptian themed bottles too. So it's just kind of fun. Euphrates is our like weird kind of co-ferment slash natural coffee. So it's not going to taste like coffee. It's going to taste like something else. And so we had a coffee last year that was not a co-ferment. It was just a natural coffee that tasted like coconut. And that was called like coconut alternative. And so we we have the stout base that's like made to like really accentuate the coffee flavor. And then so we're presenting it in 3 different ways, which is a fun experiment. And then so it just tasted like coconut. It was like a coconut stout, but it didn't make any sense because it was coffee. And then we'll do like a watermelon co-ferment for like the members club. They always get the weird stuff, the co-ferments. And so then you're getting a stout that tastes like watermelon. And it's just a very weird kind of flavor, but I love it and the members love it.
How do you get
so
that watermelon coffee co-ferment flavor to survive through that kind of process?
Yeah, I mean,
because watermelon's a relatively delicate flavor, and
yes, and so the coffee has to be very potent for it to really present. And you know, our coffee stouts have done pretty well at lasting for a long time. They typically don't go the green pepper and that whole entire vibe because we're resting the coffee before we're using it. So if you let it off gas for 2 to 3 weeks before you're starting to actually use the coffee on the beer, and then we let it rest inside
off gas just in a neutral atmospheric environment, or
yeah, don't like if you put it in a freezer, it's gonna or a cold room, then the coffee's not gonna off gas. So yeah, I mean, all of our coffees in shop we're aging for 2 to 3 weeks before we service, like use them in service. So we're just sitting on 2 to 3 weeks supply of coffee, and obviously that varies up and down, but we do the same thing with our stout. So we'll age the coffee for 2 to 3 weeks before we use it, and then we find that it needs to sit in the stout for about, and the stout, once it's done being infused with the coffee, needs to sit for another like 2 to 3 weeks for it to really be what we want it to taste like. It's going to taste really bad for the first 2 to 3 weeks. And so it's just very weird. I don't know how to explain it other than it's weird. But then after that, every single month that goes by, the coffee flavor will get more and more pronounced. So we've had coffee stouts that are 3-4 years old that were like Guatemalan Pulcal, just like basic brew coffee. And it is the most coffee stout that I've had. So it's very weird.
I don't know that I quite understand that. So let's talk about your, the process. Putting whole beans in a tank and just hanging bags, recirculating. What is that initial process?
No, actually.
Grinding. I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, yeah,
or is there something proprietary here?
Yeah, it's a little proprietary. It's something that we do that's special, but yeah, we are grinding them, and then we're applying pressure, and we're infusing the stout with that. I don't really know. Don't really want to go into too much, but yes, we do something special, and we really like the outcome on the coffee stouts. So.
And then, then after that, it sits in a tank for 2 to 3 weeks before you package it.
Correct.
And it needs that time to basically lager itself, together into a cohesive kind of flavor.
Yeah. So all told, it's about 5-6 weeks. So we'll do the blend. We'll get the coffee in ideally 2 to 3 weeks before the blend is done, and then. Once we do that, then we do the infusion, and then after the infusion, we'll let it rest for 3 weeks and then package. And then it's pretty much shelf stable at that point. As long as there's not an infection, we're in a good state.
And it's interesting that you note that the coffee flavor actually increases because, I think, common wisdom would say drink coffee stout as fresh as you can because that coffee flavor is just going to degrade somewhat quickly. And you're saying that is there like how many months did you go where it starts to then peak? And then is there a point there where it has reached its kind of maximum and then eventually degrades?
Yeah, no, just like every other brewer, whenever we release it is when we say that's the best time to drink it, right? So we don't release it until we think it's tasting good. We don't package it until we think it's tasting what we would say is at an acceptable level. It's just a fun observation that certain coffees that we've dealt with have gotten stronger and stronger and stronger over time, specifically the ones that are not your co-ferments, not your natural coffees. It's more the wash coffees that seem to get stronger and stronger and stronger. The co-ferments and others, I will say, they do start doing some weird things. They're not bad. They're not the pepper. It's just like the watermelon might fall off after a couple of years, and that kind of stuff. But I've still got some coffee stouts in the fridge that we're just kind of tasting as we go, and it's just kind of fun to see what they do. But yes, what we always tell everybody is try it now, don't wait. It's not worth cellaring. I mean, you can, but it's like we can't guarantee the flavor, right?
Sure. In addition to coffee or on top of coffee, are there other ingredients that you've really found yourself enjoying working with, as post blend adjuncts in these imperial stouts?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite is probably cinnamon, like just different, like we did a bunch of samples with different origins of cinnamon to find the ones that we like the most. And so, yeah, whenever we're dealing with cassia bark, that's, your Chinese cinnamon. We find that that's more like your cherry pie kind of flavor, like the pie crust. We use Indonesian cinnamon for our like cinnamon toast crunch kind of vibe, if that makes sense, or like the milk from cinnamon toast crunch. And so one of our brands is a kind of Lord of the Rings themed, and it's named Anduin. And that one in particular is one that we have like a week every year because people really love it. And it's like just a cinnamon vanilla stout, and it's really good.
What's the secret to great tasting cinnamon in beer?
Fresh, absolutely fresh. Don't get old stuff. Don't vacuum seal it, but also use it quickly because it's not going to taste good a year from now, or it's not going to taste as good. Also, specifically with Indonesian cinnamon, if you let it age too long in the tank, we find that it turns into this like wet dog kind of flavor, which is terrible. So with that one, it's super annoying. We have to swap out the cinnamon every like 2-3 days so that it gives us the flavor we want, but it doesn't over extract. Because the over extraction is when it tastes like wet dog. And so a lot of times we'll end up doing like 2, 3, 4 days of just dosaging with fresh cinnamon that we're sous videing, so that we make sure that it's like we'll fill up some bags in a sous vide with the cinnamon and then get it to the right temperature so we know it's pasteurized or like safe, and then we'll adjunct with that so we don't get infections. That's just something we learned so that we don't infect our big stouts.
Yeah, better not to have to recall these down the road or make good with your customers on something you've just spent all of that money going through and making.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Barleywine before we wrap up here, just because we did talk about it at the very top, and you're sending some barley wine our way. It's not the biggest category out here in the beer world, but it again lets you kind of play in with these layers of malt that you also seem to love to play with. And if there's any kind of platform that will let you use a lot of barley of different kinds, Barleywine is certainly it. So tell me about barrel selection for Barleywine versus barrel selection for stout. Is there something to the whiskey or bourbon that or rye that you are looking for when Barleywine is going to go into it versus stout? Does that differ at all?
I tend to avoid rye actually whenever I'm doing barley wine, just because it's not the character I want in my barley wine. I've done it occasionally and just haven't really loved the result. So going for more the wheated, and I do love just bourbon barrels in general. I tend to stay away from Tennessee whiskey, even though we have so many Tennessee whiskey barrels. I just don't love the character that comes out of them, and so a lot of our barley wines end up in Weller barrels and Four Roses yet again. So it's just, those are kind of my favorite go-tos.
Cool. Well, let's zoom out here as we finish, as we typically do. You all started in 2019, so this is 7 years in now. Beer has changed quite a bit, even in that amount of time. You are still here, you still love it, and you're still trading brewer friends for beers so that you can taste it and get the entire team, into it, and make sure that continuing education happens. So you clearly haven't lost your passion for it. What's next for Living Waters? What do you hope to achieve in the next few years? And where do you see the business in 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, right now everything, lagers and stouts are just kind of our passion. And we know we've had some fun with some of the new hop products, the flowables like Prisma, which was a ton of fun to play with that we just got to do. But I think the future is, as much direct to consumer as we can. We really want to kind of make sure that people can experience our product in, the best possible way. And taking care of our people. And, we're also looking at starting roasting ourselves and starting to develop those relationships with the growers, which is important to us. Just being able to say we know the people who are making our inputs and that they're being taken care of. And that's just something that's really important to us.
Well, that is a great place to bring this to a close. Stop by and check out the latest innovations at the G&D Chillers booth 1518 at CBC. Berkeley Yeast's Dry Tropics London offers their best-selling liquid yeast strain with the ease of use of dry yeast. Pactex handles are made from 100% recycled plastic and are fully recyclable. Taste the flavors of indie hops at CBC booth 926 this year in Philly and sample 14 incredible beers. The Midea 50/50 Flex can convert to all fridge, all freezer, or half and half with just the touch of a button. Old Orchard is your one-stop shop for fruit juice concentrates, purees, and blends. The SS Brew Pump from SS Brewtech is engineered to tackle even the messiest brew days. And get your tickets now to the Craft Beer Brewing Brewers Retreat in August at the front end of Hop Harvest at Bale Breaker in Yakima. Once again, if you enjoy this podcast and you're going to be in Philly for CBC, shoot me an email that Monday night at Union Transfer. We're going to do a live version of this, and I've got a few free comp tickets for listeners out there. Shoot me an email, jbogner@beerandbrewing.com, and I'll send you a code so you can come listen in and be a part of it live, maybe even throw your own question out there in the audience, Mike, and all of that kind of thing. Ryan, if people want to learn more about Living Waters and the beers you make, barrel-aged or not, IPA, lager, barley wine, barrel-aged stout, whatever it is, where can they find you all in real life and out there in the digital space?
Yeah, so we've got two locations, 1056 East Trinity Lane in Nashville, East Nashville, and then 4909 Indiana Avenue in West Nashville, Tennessee. And Instagram, Living Waters Brewing, and online, www.livingwatersbrewing.com. Well,
I, speaking for myself, think that this flowed very well. The Living Waters has just permeated, this entire episode, and I have tried to drop in as many of these references to your brands as I could, and I hope somebody can go back in and spot every single one of those as they get through it. It's been great talking with you. I enjoy listening, I enjoyed tasting your approach to making barrel-aged stouts. Really fascinating, and obviously the results are in the bottle right there, rated 97 by our blind panel. Congratulations on that. Love what you guys are doing. Cheers, Ryan.
Thanks so much. Cheers.
This podcast has been brought to you by Craft Beer and Brewing Magazine for those who love to make and drink great beer. To learn more or to subscribe, visit beerandbrewing.com or find us on social media at Craft Beer Brew.